Welcome to Significant Breed Success. This week, I have somebody who is a rock star from the UK, Cambridge. Peter Cowley is an investor. He's a serial entrepreneur. Love what you're doing. Love the companies that you're building. Peter, thanks for coming on today.
Good. Thank you.
So right now, is the main thing that you're doing is building companies. I see you're the founder of the Invested Investor. I see one of the companies, one of the titles you had was pretty funny right here, The Naked Scientist.
Yes, that's not mine. That's a friend who set that up as a podcast 20 years ago, The Naked Scientist. I'm the technologist on a science program. So this is something that goes out on the BBC in the UK and in Australia and in South Africa, etc. Lots of podcasts. So that's a minor part of my career. That's what taught me to cope with live radio, actually, so which you might have tried yourself.
I love it. And I asked you if you did comedy on the weekend. You said no, not yet, or your friend.
Yeah, something like that. Yes.
but great personality. So tell me, I find in entrepreneurship, definitely in the university world or the schooling world, that kids are taught how to sit down, be quiet, do as I tell you, take a test, but we want them to really be entrepreneurs. I mean, a lot of employees today, managers, executives, we want them to be an entrepreneurship mindset of, create a vision, go after something, make an impact, create something new. But we really set up kids from, when they're 2 years old to when they're 22 to really sit down, be quiet, and do as I tell you. What do you see with that in entrepreneurship?
Yes, that's a good point. I mean, I don't know what you know about China, but the educational system is even more defined and rigid than you're suggesting there. And in fact, we look at the Americans as being really more entrepreneurial than the UK education system. Entrepreneurship, and the word actually means undertaker, not funeral undertaker, but somebody who undertakes in French. That's where it comes from. But it's being used for somebody who's willing to take risk. And this is what it's about. You regimented procedure through school. There's no risk there at all, apart from failing your exams, etc. But that's usually due to either lack of ability or lack of putting the time into it. But an entrepreneur needs to take risk, and this isn't just risk, financial risk. This is opportunity cost risk. This is, if they did this, they'll do that, and it might fail or not. If they did this and became a bank manager or a solicitor or a lawyer, as you call them, or an accountant, that's a steady career. So it's somehow getting it into them. Now, is that genetic or not? Is that something that you're born with, or is that something you inherit or learn on your way through your childhood? I don't know. In my case, my father was a small businessman. He employed some staff. But I wanted to be much more risky than he did. So I don't know. It's definitely part of the education, but I still think it's also part of genetic mix.
So on your website, I see you have a clickable link to charitable. And how do you think that the future of, we've seen Tom's shoes, we've seen brands and companies create, you buy a shoe like Tom's shoes, they give a shoe away. How do you think that entrepreneurship, I've created companies where we own private schools. So there's purpose and profit mixed together. Purpose because I can go and impact kids. And I do it better than any other school system I've seen ever for what we bring in. And the profit is everybody gets to make money to be able to grow and make more impact. Because if you don't have the money side of the real business side of it, then I look at what's the point behind it? Like, okay, I can make something, but is it serving something, is it serving the world with a need and solving problems? What's your thought on that?
Yes, this is I think we're best part of a generation difference in age. And my generation was mainly driven by financial return and not by impact or outcome or whatever. That has changed. It's changed even more so for people younger than you, where they do want to make a difference. Now, every company in principle, if it employs people, is doing something, because it's actually feeding those. But that's not enough, really, because that doesn't give enough. And you could take a defense company that clearly employs people but clearly hasn't got the right outcome. So more and more the people under 35 and under are wanting, not all of them, but most of them want some sort of social outcome built into it. They certainly, in most cases, don't want negative social outcome, where negative social outcome would be clearly using more carbon fuels, defense industry, etc., etc. So they want to do that. So there is definitely a move towards it. that's not that easy to do, because the correlation or the connection between a social outcome and a scaling business which has got a financial return isn't quite there yet, in my view. So the ones that have a social outcome, I don't know Tom's shoes, but I can imagine what you mean, and that's obviously done very well. But there are many businesses out there with strong social outcome that haven't necessarily grown very big. And that's the issue, is getting society to accept that, getting investors to accept that, so that the social outcome will come with the business growth.
So I love, for instance, like what Google does. Google gives the nonprofits, like for instance, my nonprofit gets 10,000 a month, up to 10,000 in Google Ads. So think about how much ad space that really is. I mean, that's so much. I mean, we're driving, anywhere from like 6,000 to 8,000 views, clicks a month onto our nonprofit to be able to show off what we're doing, to be able to show off how we're impacting community, that sort of thing. So I love how these companies do it in their own way, like Home Depot. They can donate supplies to build homes. So I love that people are coming up with this.
But are they doing that in the right way? Are they doing that just for CSR reasons, corporate social responsibility? Are they doing that with a core focus of proper social outcome? And I suspect many of these aren't. They're paying. It also depends on what the proportion is. I mean, if it was 0.1% of revenues, that is a CSR, isn't it? If it's 10% of revenues, that really is going to make a bottom line difference, won't it? That might even erode most of their profits.
Yeah, so that's really interesting on the percent, because I find a lot of the time that people do things to just do them to look good, versus really having that built into the corporate culture, the corporate structure, the corporate identity of from the beginning. Because big companies after 10, 20 years, definitely maybe older companies that are 30, 40, 50 years old now, they came in with a time of maybe coming out of the war, maybe 50, 60 years ago, they got built. But, big companies like GE, I think, just got its first CEO that was not built within the company, and they're a major $1 billion company, but they brought somebody from the outside in. And I think that was the first time in the last, 50 or 100 years they did that. So it's interesting, I think, how people build in their culture to define how they do what they do, and also how they build in their profit margins to make sure they can achieve those goals.
Yes, exactly. It is that. It's difficult to see how a big company could change its philosophy. I mean, obviously, a really powerful, really well-respected CEO would be able to do that. But I suspect it really needs to be done from the ground. And by the ground, I mean from the point when the company's formed. Where you really need to build that in. So social enterprises, as we call them in the UK, I don't know what you call them over there in the States, where you've got something where it's built into the legal structure that they must have positive social outcomes. And in that legal structure, if they want to change the direction they're going, there's usually something that'll stop them doing that.
So in America, we have a lot of the corporations have their own nonprofits. They have their own foundations. What's interesting is to be able to see the foundations or nonprofits, if they give money away or actually do things. So like a Bank of America, what they'll do is, from what I've seen, is they'll give a big lump of money in different cities away every year, but then they'll also take a lot of their employees like UPS, and they'll actually impact and spend time with their employees on the ground, impacting different foundations or nonprofits, whether painting or rebuilding or whatever that is. So it's interesting to see where that's going. The reason I bring it up is I saw it on your website, and I love, I'm looking at this right here, and it says charities and social enterprise. So I see you're part of multiple different, projects with giving back. Why so much? Why care so much about impacting other lives?
Well, I don't know. Maybe that's built into my character, built into my politics, built into the UK system or something. Like many of the people I mix with are privileged. We're privileged because we've ended up with a good education. We've been worked hard. We've ended up with money. I don't know what your feeling is, where you are on the political scale, but I'm definitely left of centre. I'm definitely more Democrat than Republican by quite a long way. And the way that those, even though I'm wealthy, and the way that we do this is by making sure that we give something back to society. And I've done that not so much with cash, but with my time. And I've done that with charities. Now, charities are not social enterprises necessarily. I don't think they have the same structure in the States. Can I just go back a little bit, though? In terms of driving a business to give social outcome like Bank of America, this will depend on the shareholders to a large extent. Is this what the shareholders want? Because if it isn't what they want, that'll be reflected in the share price, won't it? So they've got to be very cautious. So the final owners of a company aren't the board or the CEO or the chair, it's the shareholders. And people have got to look at the shareholders. And if the shareholders don't like what's happening, they'll move the money somewhere else. And the incentivization of the board generally is based on share price. So they have to do what the shareholders do. And that philosophy needs changing if you're going to get big companies to do more social outcome. That's my view. It may not be a common view, but that's my view.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, at the end of the day, it comes down to the shareholders. It comes down to the board. It comes down to the CEOs in a private company, right? And the board, if they have a board. And I think
it's different with a private company, because the private company, the shareholders can't easily move their shares money to somewhere else. That's a big difference. And many private companies are family owned or owned by the founders originally, so they can really do what they want. It's the public companies where share capital can be removed if they don't like how the company's run.
Yeah, and it's interesting today where I see, and I was just talking to somebody else about this a couple of days ago, is it's interesting to see leadership, because a lot of the time, I grew up in Northern California, so home of Apple computers and HP and Google and all these brands in Silicon Valley. And I was, a lot of my friends work for these companies. One of my friends was one of the first 100 employees at Facebook. So to be able to see, she got stock options, she retired at like 27 years old. Right. And what's interesting is to be able to see what's possible with companies from the founders. I think a lot of our founders that are entrepreneurs are more interested in, building companies than giving back until they see a reason to give back. So it's great because they're building companies and they're building jobs and they're taking care of community and they're building community. So I like that side of it. What I would love to see in the future is more entrepreneurs looking at, how do I build this in from the beginning? How do I give back? How do I mentor? How do I coach? How do I, like Jake, I hired him out of Nova Southeastern University and he's a rock star. But at the end of the day, there's only a couple kids that I would have hired out of hundreds that I met, because he shows up on time and he commits and follows through. Where do you see companies today, entrepreneurs today, building their future workforce and their teams? And do you see a challenge if our kids aren't prepared for life?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely true. And there is a big difference, not just in our language between English and American, but also in our philosophy. And the way that we're educated, the way that money is definitely more important in the States than it is over here. I mean, we have a saying here that, and I've said many times to many people, that if you give a 35-year-old $20 million, that's enough. $20 million exited entrepreneur in the States is nothing like enough. They want $200 million or $2 billion. The drive for financial return is massively more. I mean, that has its downsides, of course, because it means that entrepreneurs here in the UK tend to sell out early, and we tend to sell out early to American companies, as it turns out. But it's a different education. Clearly, with your current president, whatever you think about him, and of course I've got my views, he's driving that the concept of money being so important even more strongly than certainly the previous president. So no, in order to do this, the entrepreneurs, who are by definition somebody who's not running with the masses and doing something, they're challenging the system anyway by having disruptive ideas and taking risks, etc. Those are the ones that need to make the decision that social outcomes are also important. But as you say, there aren't really enough of them yet. So that needs some sort of educational, philosophical change in society. And hopefully that will happen. But it'll only happen if some of the people at the top, like the sort of Zuckerberg, etc., lead that movement forward in that direction.
Yeah. So it's interesting because, you said you're a little more on the Democrat side than the Republican side. And, it's interesting on, for instance, like, this president. I know you've probably seen some of the media. I don't know what you guys see for the media, because I don't see much.
Well, it's not usually very good, whatever we see.
So it's interesting on like education, where it's going, where it has been the last 50 years versus where let's say, and we don't need to jump in on politics necessarily, but And I've never read a policy that's being implemented ever that is really